Hello, everybody. I think we are live on LinkedIn. It is Friday, December the 20th, and it is December the 20th, 2024. And the reason why the year is so important is because this is the final Visto Show of the year, 2024. December the 20th. And we're going to do a bit of a special episode because on the last show, which was about 2 weeks ago, I had an idea to do a year in review, and I kind of polled it to the audience, and the audience seemed to agree that a year in review episode would be kind of good. And I think one of the reasons why, number one, I always kind of like year in review type stuff, but number two is this has been, I don't even think you could debate the craziest, most full of changes year in Canadian immigration in certainly a very long time. Now, I've only been practicing for a relative short amount of time, right? I've been in Canadian immigration for about 8 years now. Not a short amount of time, but not a very long amount of time either, right? And I certainly can't remember a year that's come even close. I guess maybe the year of COVID was the closest because of all the stuff that was happening around the world and, blah, blah, blah. But certainly have not had a year like this that I can remember where there's been so many changes, caps, cuts, etc., etc. So I want to get into it on this show. So what we're going to do for the final show of 2024 is, number one, we're going to go over what I think, because there's been too many changes, right? So what I'm going to do on this episode is I'm going to go over what I think, and I went back through my notes and the IRCC news and updates and stuff like that, and what I'm going to cover is what I think are the 5 biggest changes that happened over the last year in 2024. And you can let me know if you agree. We can review it pretty quickly, etc., etc. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick update on the Visto side, right? Just talk a little bit about how where we've come over the last year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at heading into 2025 personally, on the business side, all that fun stuff. So it's going to be a fun episode, hopefully. And if you have any thoughts, if you have any opinions on the stuff that I'm about to share, please feel free to join in on the conversation. If you're watching in on LinkedIn, you can join live. If you're not and you're watching after the fact on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you think. So anyways, I'm going to jump into it. So here are, in reverse order, what I think are the 5 biggest changes that have happened that I'm going to, quickly recap in Canadian immigration. And I'm going to share my screen here. And this video is obviously sponsored by Visto. And so let's do the top 5. And I'm going to make this, how do I change the font size? There we go. I'm going to change the font size. And we're going to do it as we usually do on the Visto show in the very formal Microsoft Paint. Now, starting with number 5. So of the top 5, what I would say is the least, we're starting from bottom to top here, right? So the top 5 changes in Canadian immigration from 2024. Number 5 is the Mexican TRV requirement. What do I mean by this? Now, as many of you know, until this past year, if you're a US or Mexican citizen, you can enter Canada with just your passport and or applying for an ETA, right? So Mexican citizens used to be able to just apply for an ETA online, electronic travel authorization. It takes a couple minutes, it costs $7, and usually within like 24 hours, you get your ETA and you're able to travel to Canada. Now, what happened in the last year or two? We had an explosion of asylum claims, amongst other things, but an explosion of in Canada asylum claims from people who would just come as visitors and for a wide variety of reasons claim asylum, refugee status, etc., etc. So what the government decided to do was they changed the ETA requirements. Now, this is not for all Mexicans. Like, for example, if you have a Canadian visa already, I think within the last 10 years, or a non-immigrant US visa, I believe you're exempt and you can still apply for an ETA. But if not, you now have to, as a Mexican citizen, apply for a TRV, a visitor visa, from your home country. Apply, submit the application, all the documents, the forms, the $100 processing fee for the visitor visas, and hopefully get approved before you could travel. I don't know about you, but I thought that was a pretty big change, pretty interesting change, so I have it here listed as number 5. Now, number 4. Again, these are going from quote-unquote least exciting to most exciting of the top 5 changes of the year. Number 4 is the changes to entrepreneurs and programs. What do I mean by this? There's been a huge amount of changes. Hold on, let me move this around. I'm going to need some more space here because I want to put, for example, in brackets, I want to put SUV, I want to put ICT, and I want to put self-employed. So what do I mean by this? Over the span of the last year, the government has made a lot of changes to these programs, right? So for example, they made a huge cap on the startup visa program. So now only every what are they called? Designated, I think it's just designated entity, can only approve 10 startups per year. This used to be uncapped, and now they can only give letters of support to 10 startups every year. ICT they recently changed, so they changed the definition of multinational corporation. So now under ICT, you can only apply through ICT if your company abroad has offices in 2 countries that are not Canada. So ICT stands for intra-company transfer, which means if you've worked for a year or more at a company abroad that also has a branch or a subsidiary or a partner company in Canada, you used to be able to just move them over with a few other requirements, of course. They recently changed it because apparently people were taking advantage. They'd have a company abroad, they'd open up a company in Canada, just move themselves over, but they want to basically stop people from doing that illegitimately, I guess. So now they're making it so you need to have companies in at least 2 countries outside of Canada before you can expand and move people in through ICT. And then they also closed down entirely the self-employed PR program. This is, I think, more for people in the arts and stuff like that. Now, one of the reasons I have this on the list is because, big changes, right, to these entrepreneurial programs. The other reason is because I really don't like these moves at all. I kind of understand it a little bit for SUV, because SUV, kind of like the study permit program, the floodgates were open for too long, it's being misused, it's being mismanaged, blah, blah, blah. But, my big gripe with IRCC this year is instead of fixing problems, they're just capping programs, which I don't think is a long-term solution. I actually think these changes from number 4 are quite bad because our economy is really struggling. And if we do need certain types of immigrants right now, it's entrepreneurs. It's people who can create jobs. It's people who can help our economy. And so I don't love the changes that have been made, specifically focused on entrepreneurs and these types of programs. And we'll have to see what happens in the new year and or if there's a change in government. Item number 3. The top 3 biggest changes in Canadian immigration in 2024. Is the 2024 to 2026, or no, was it 2025 to 2027 levels plan. And not only was it the plan, so I'm going to put in brackets reduction plus TR numbers. So the reason why the levels plan was so interesting this year, 2 reasons why. Number 1, for the first time in a very long time, the caps have frozen and or gone down. And number 2, for the first time, maybe ever, is the government set a levels plan for temporary residence numbers as well. So it was a very interesting levels plan. If you haven't already, definitely check out the special episode of the Visto Show where I go through the levels plan line by line, number by number, and give my opinion. But this was a shocking, I don't want to say shocking, I think we all kind of knew that there were going to be reductions in the levels plan that was released this year. But number 1, I didn't think that they'd be so harsh in certain categories. So, for example, I was surprised to see that the PNP category was capped so hard, that the entrepreneurial category was capped so hard. And so that was a little bit surprising. And then number two, it was interesting and I think good to finally see some numbers on the TR side. Because I think that one of the biggest problems for Canadian immigration right now is that because the government really was asleep at the wheel for 8+ years, is there'd always been a levels plan for PR and there'd never been a levels plan for TR, and those numbers got out of balance, right? When things were more quote unquote normal in like the 20 teens, those numbers were kind of in lockstep and in harmony and worked pretty well together. What happened, because the government let more specifically, the international student industry get totally out of control, the number of temporary residents ballooned, which had a really bad effect on PR as well. Because typically, PR favors those who are temporary residents in Canada. So if you have way more temporary residents in Canada all of a sudden, but your PR numbers and your plan stays the same, something's got to give. Right, and that's basically what happened in this case. So that's number three, in my opinion, one of the most interesting, or I guess it's not really a change, but one of the biggest IRCC news items of 2024 was the levels plan with the inclusion of the TR numbers as well. Now we're getting to the top two, so I'm going to take a segue sip here before we get into item number 2 of the most interesting Canadian immigration news item of 2024. And that is, let me pull up my notes here because I don't want to get it wrong. Oh, crap, I mixed it up. This was actually supposed to be number 2. Crap, this was supposed to be number 2. Okay, we're adjusting on the fly here. Number 3, so that was number 2. Oh, God, I should have just kept it as number 3 and not said anything. Anyways, number 3 is the major LMIA changes. And I'm going to put in brackets here, low wage cap, high wage, minimum wage, and more recently, removal of LMIA points. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Now, for those who don't know, some major changes to the LMIA program, more specifically in the second half of the year, right? The first half of the year was a little bit more in favor of a lot of the student stuff and, PR stuff. Second half of this year, the LMIA has just been getting totally gutted. So, for example, they basically capped the low-wage LMIA stream unless you fit under one of a couple of very specific industries, I think like healthcare, construction, or agriculture, or whatever it was, I don't remember. They made a big 20% increase in the minimum wage requirement for the high wage stream, right? So LMIs have multiple streams. You can apply through the low wage stream, the high wage stream, the global talent stream, the express entry stream, etc., etc. They basically removed the low wage stream unless you're applying for a certain industry like ag and whatever. For the high wage stream, so when you're applying for an LMIA, you must meet a minimum wage. They increased that minimum wage by 20% for the high wage stream. And then the news from this very week is that apparently they're removing the LMIA bonus points in express entry for LMIA-backed work permit holders. So what this means is, for those unaware, through express entry, which is a points-based PR program, you can get bonus points if you have an LMIA-backed work permit. IRCC is reportedly, apparently Minister Miller said this on a TV interview, but we still have no formal announcement from IRCC, which that in and of itself boggles my mind, right? How you have ministers that are sharing major updates on news channels, but this is before they've even released formal statements with actual details. I find that really frustrating. I don't know if anybody agrees with me. Like, I would just love if IRCC made these announcements formally through their own website with all the details first, instead of, going and sharing them on the news. But anyways, that's a side tangent. So what they've decided to do, because there is so much LMIA fraud, so what's happened is, to give the more backstory for those who don't know, because express entry and permanent residence have been so hard to get this year, people have basically been buying LMIAs. So they find, or through a third party, they will pay a company to sponsor them for an LMIA work permit so that they get bonus points so that they can get PR. Now, again, going on the, I think, sad trend, I think the sad trend that IRCC has followed this year is they see that there's problems, but they're not fixing the problems. They're just capping programs. They're not actually going to the root of the problems. So they're not really going to fix the fraud. They're just saying, we're going to remove all the points for everybody. And the problem I have with this is I like the LMIA bonus points because it allows the market to determine who should be getting those points, right? In a perfect world, the people who have the LMIA-backed work permits are the people who have companies that are willing to sponsor them because they really need them. I really need these agricultural workers, these STEM workers, these healthcare workers, et cetera, et cetera. But now, because some people have spoiled or abused the LMIA system, again, instead of the government going directly to try and solve the fraud, they're just saying, we're going to waive the points bonus for everybody, which means someone who's here on an LMIA-backed work permit for something like healthcare or agriculture, they're no longer going to get the bonus points, which in my opinion is a huge loss. So anyways, I don't love honestly, I don't love any of the LMIA changes for the same reason. Don't just cap and make things harder. Because if you make a program harder, sure, you're going to turn away some fraud. You're also going to turn away the legitimate businesses and skilled workers who want to make the most of these programs for the reason that they were created in the first place. So item number 5, I agreed with. Changes in number 4, I really don't like. Changes in number 3, I really don't like. Changes in number 2, I mostly agree with. Some of them not so much. I don't understand why the PNPs were cut so much, et cetera, et cetera. But I really have not been a fan of the LMIA changes personally. You can let me know what you think in the comments. Cecile says, not sure what I think about the caps for TFWs. If the programs are well structured and genuinely assess applications from employers to detect legitimacy and fraud, I don't think a cap is necessary. But it's easier to add a cap than to improve the programs, I guess. This is exactly it. This is exactly what I'm basically saying. I think Cecile said it even better than I did, which is the reason why they made all these caps is because people are abusing the program. But that doesn't mean you should just shut down the program. These are good programs. I actually think Immigration Canada has a great, how do I say this? Like a great immigration system. I like a lot of the programs. I think it makes sense. I like the interconnectedness between TR and PR and blah, blah, blah. I like Express Entry. I like Startup Visa. I like the LMI process. Just improve them so that you can actually sniff out the fraud and prevent the fraud and improve, compliance, reviews and stuff like that, so that the good players can still use them without it being too burdensome, and the frauds get caught. And the penalties are so harsh that it either turns people away from the very outset so they never bother, or if they get caught, it's so burdensome that they're kind of screwed, right? So for example, instead of capping SUV or capping all these LMIAs, just say, listen, if we catch you committing LMIA fraud, number 1, the employee is immediately deported with a 5+ year ban. Number 2, the company is put on a blacklist. They can never apply for an LMI again, and they get fined $1 million, right? Or whatever. Pick a number that will scare the crap out of companies. Right? I guess it depends on the size of the company. If you're like a small company, you probably can't even afford that. But in my opinion, those 2 things would fix the problem way more than what they've done here, right? If you are found to have been an illegitimate Startup Visa founder or an illegitimate LMIA work permit holder, you are immediately deported and banned. You cannot come back to Canada for a minimum of 5 years, right? Period. End of story. And then on the company side, if you are a company found to have committed LMIA fraud, you are immediately blacklisted. Your company can never use the LMIA program again. You're fined $1 million. It's going to be garnished through the government. That's my opinion of what would fix this way more. But anyways, Cecile says, on top of the official LMI changes, I've noticed that ESDC and MIFI ask a lot more questions these days. In the GTS particularly, the agents look a lot more at legitimacy and ask a lot more from the employers and the LMBPs. So that's like a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because they're starting to, it seems, dig a little bit deeper and make sure that the right companies are actually using these programs, which is good. The bad part is if they do it in an inefficient way, it's going to turn off legitimate companies, right? The goal here is how do we weed out the fraud, but how do we also make the programs appealing enough to the legitimate employers who actually need these programs, right? So that they can grow and get talent and help our economy grow. So that's great to hear, Cecile. I just hope they're not overdoing it. Because again, if they start asking too many questions and they make the process too burdensome and they start refusing legitimate employers, it's going to turn legitimate employers away from using it. And that's a big shame, in my opinion. But I guess time will tell, so we'll have to see. So these are so far, the top 4 Immigration Canada moves of 2024 in terms of just like big stories, right? We have the Mexican TRV requirement, changes to the entrepreneurial programs, the big LMIA changes, and the 2025, I forget if it's called 2025 or 2024, whatever the levels plan was that was released in November. And last but not least, the number 1 biggest changes to the Canadian immigration space in 2024 will be announced after I have a sip of water. 1 second here. That point got me all fired up, so I said a little bit more than I expected. Okay, number 1, this should be pretty obvious to most of you who have followed the immigration space or know the industry pretty well or anything like that. Far and away, the program that got changed and one might say gutted the most, there's no close second, is, I'll say, the international student changes. And I could almost do a whole episode on all the changes that have happened in the international student space, right? And it even started before 2024. So if many of you remember, I think it was actually November of 2023 where they first started making announcements of the cap for international students. And now throughout the year, they've just kind of like piled on with even more changes, right? So just to review a high level of a few of the changes that they've done this year. Number 1, they've capped the number of international students for the next 2 years, right? So they've never done that before, right? So I'll say cap for 2 years. They closed SDS, right? So they closed the SDS program. May I remind you, on a Friday afternoon with no heads up, change to DLIs, right? So you have to apply through a designated learning institution. They changed how they're managing and kind of holding to standard the DLIs and how they're able to maintain their DLI status. PALS, provincial attestation letters. So now when a school approves a student, they have to apply, what was the word I'm looking for here? Supply them with not only an approval letter, but a provincial attestation letter, which is given by the government, right? So the feds set a target of how many approvals per year, and then each province is given a certain amount of PALs, and then the province has to determine which schools get how many PALs, right? Provincial attestation letters. So there's that. DLI requirements, I went over. PGWP requirements, oh my God. I'm just going to put PGWP changes, right? Because again, we could do a whole episode on the changes that they've made to the post-grad work permit. It used to be everyone and their mother come study in Canada, and then when you graduate from anything, that's a DLI and eligible, which is like most of the schools, you would get a postgraduate work permit so that you can start working and work your way towards PR. What they did this year is they made a big change to the post-grad work permit program, wherein only certain students studying certain programs for certain industries can even be eligible to apply for a post-grad work permit, which I think if you're not a master's degree student, I forget exactly what it is, but it's like if you're not a master's or bachelor's degree or something, you also need to write a language exam, which was never required for PGWP. You never needed a language exams for PGWP. So again, tons of huge changes to the international student space. I think we knew that something was going to happen and something needed to happen. I have mixed feelings. I think about half of these changes are good, and I think about half of them are not so good for the reasons that I explained before, which is just they're a little bit overreacting and they're not going to the core of the problem, right? So for example, I think the PALs are kind of stupid. Why do you need a school to provide a provincial attestation letter on top of an approval letter, of an acceptance letter, right? If the student is applying to a school with legitimate documents and the school is doing a legitimate evaluation of that student's application and only giving approvals to good students, and then if Immigration Canada is properly evaluating, hey, that acceptance letter is real, hey, this bank statement is real, hey, these mark sheets from grade school are real. Why do we need a PAL? If anything, it just adds more admin work and more steps to the process, right? But again, the problem here is people have been abusing the system so much and for so long that the government has just, made a whole bunch of these changes. And again, my concern here is if they make it too hard to come to Canada as a student, the best and the brightest are going to look elsewhere, right? I understand that we need to make some shifts and we had to make some caps, but keep in mind the international student industry is a hugely important industry for our country, and it's a hugely important supply of talent that our country does need, right? It just needs to be done more strategically, unlike what was done over the last 5 years, so that you don't have 1 million business admin degree graduates who can barely speak English now holding a 1 or a 2 year piece of paper that can't get them a job, right? Which is essentially what happened, if I can generalize for just a second. So anyways, to recap, these are, in my opinion, having gone through IRCC News and my recent Visto shows and stuff like that, these are what I think are the 5 biggest news items or changes from Canadian immigration in 2024. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did I miss anything? Just to do a quick recap. Number 1, changing the travel requirements so that now a lot of Mexican citizens are going to have to apply for a TRV before coming to Canada. That was number 5. Number 4, changes to the entrepreneurial type programs. So like the SUV cap, the ICT change, closing the self-employed program. Major LMI changes, right, as I talked about. Capping the low wage, high wage minimum wage increase, removal of LMI points. Big changes to the LMI. Number 2 was the recent levels plan that came out in November, right? So for the first time ever, they included temporary residence numbers, and for the first time in a long time, the numbers are flat or reducing over time, which is kind of crazy. And then number 1, the international student space, right? Just totally getting gutted and kind of almost like redesigned in a sense, based on what's happened and where the government wants to go. So those are my top 5. Hopefully you find this helpful in terms of like, oh my God, so much stuff happened this year, and this is kind of like a half decent summary and review. If you have any thoughts, or if you think I missed any items, or that my order is off, right? So I think these are order of importance and like bigness, right? So like how big was the news? And I think number 1 was the international student space. So anyways, that is it for that segment of the show, the 5 top stories of 2024. A couple other things I want to cover just for a few more minutes before we head off. Number 1 is obviously Visto. This is called the friggin' Visto Show, right? As many of you know, Visto is our Canadian immigration platform. So basically what this does is it helps Canadian immigration firms from all across the country do a whole bunch of stuff. Primarily what we do is we help you prepare and manage and submit applications faster than ever. So we have our AI Copilot. A lot of this stuff has either been added or improved over this past year, our product has really come a long way. So our Copilot that can help you write, it can help you research, it can help you find case laws now, PNP eligibility, stuff like that. Easily gather and organize supporting documents, easily fill out on Canada government forms and PDFs, build your own workflows for different applications and checklists, all that kind of stuff. Generating documents, so we have pretty good document generation now. And so yeah, it's been a really fun year. We've come a long way. We've been working with a lot of really amazing immigration firms as well. We have certainly a long list of new products and designs and features and stuff like that that we'll be working on in 2025. Definitely make sure you're staying tuned and following me on LinkedIn, because usually with new features and stuff like that, it's where I end up posting first and foremost. Obviously on our email list, if you're not on that, let me know and I can add you to the email list, but I'm also usually posting it on LinkedIn as well. Diane says, a huge issue for me is the change in the 10-year visitor visa. Laudica says, great recap, thank you. Thank you very much, Laudica, glad you enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, certainly an interesting change there as well, Diane, too, right? So I think what you're referring to is at least part of it, too, the change that they made with the visitor visa is not necessarily guaranteeing a multiple entry visa as well. I don't remember because I don't do as much TRV stuff, but that was definitely another big change as well. It'll be interesting to see how it kind of plays out, right, as well with those changes in the next year. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, so we talked about the 5 immigration stories. We talked about Visto. What are the plans for 2025? Well, I usually don't get too personal, but I'll get a little bit personal because it's the holiday season. We're all festive. It's the end of the year, and we got a big 2025 coming up. Visto, we will be closing our offices on December the 24th to January the 2nd. I'm going to use that time to relax, rest, recharge. We've been working pretty hard, not just obviously at Visto, but trying to put out content and helpful information like this to keep everybody on the same page. So definitely going to take some time off to relax, recharge, as I think kind of everybody should, especially this time of the year. You might have noticed, if you're a loyal Visto fan, that my background is very different. Number one, I apologize because I'm waiting for a green screen because my wife and I have recently moved and we're getting settled into our new house, which we're very happy about and very lucky to have. My office has been relegated to the basement, which I actually quite enjoy, to be honest. But I need to set up a green screen so that it doesn't look like I'm about to be kidnapped in the basement here. So I'll have a green screen for the new year. So the next Visto show will look a little bit prettier, in the background. But I've got a pretty good setup down here in the basement. And part of why we decided to make that big move is because we're actually expecting, God willing, our first baby in the middle of January. So again, I don't normally get too personal here, but I'm looking forward to hopefully, potentially by the next Visto show, I may be a father, which is very exciting. So I have that to look forward to in 2025, as well as, a lot of business stuff that we're planning on doing. We've been helping, going back to the business side really quickly, we've also been obviously helping immigration firms adopt our platform to use more automation and AI. We've also been working with more firms one-on-one to audit their current systems and processes and technology, make suggestions on what they can do better, what they can build, how to implement even simple AI tools like ChatGPT, custom GPTs, integrating AI with non-AI tools and stuff like that. So I will say, if more automation or AI is on your radar or on your checklist for 2025, definitely reach out. I'd be happy to discuss. Not only do we have the platform Visto, but we're doing some extra help one-on-one with firms as well, based on what your wants and your needs are too. So that is, I think, pretty much it. That's what I wanted to cover on this episode of the Visto Show. It is the last one of the year. I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season, no matter what the heck you celebrate. I want to wish everybody a very happy new year. I'll be posting a little bit on LinkedIn before the new year, but not as much as I normally do. And then I'll obviously be back in action probably around the 2nd or 3rd of January. Most of you know I am quite active in posting on LinkedIn, sharing updates, talking about immigration, talking about AI and that kind of stuff. So definitely excited to take some time off, recharge, relax, and then we'll be back in full force in 2025. So anyways, thank you again. I just want to say for anybody who has been tuning in, watching the Visto Show, supporting us, supporting me, following me, commenting, liking, really appreciate it. It really does mean a lot. Even just little likes or, a comment here or there. If you're watching on YouTube, liking, subscribing to the channel, it actually really does help a little bit more than you probably realize. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who has been. I want to, wish everybody a restful, a happy, a peaceful holiday season, no matter what you're celebrating or where you are. I want to wish you a happy new year. Hopefully you're going to be able to spend time with family and friends and eat all that good food and stuff like that. So thank you again, everybody, for all your support, for tuning in. It's been a heck of a ride in 2024. 2025, I'm surely will keep us on our toes, and hopefully you will continue to rely on us to provide you with updates and feedback and stuff like that. So thank you again. Right before we head out, I'll just review. We got a couple comments here. Cecile says, congratulations again, Josh, and happy holidays to you and your growing family. Thank you very much, Cecile, and you've been watching for a while and really appreciate the support and wishing you the best with you and your family as well. Reza says the Visto has a plan to use the translation for people non-English to fill out the form. Yeah, Reza, we do have the ability in the platform for your clients to log in and choose whichever language they'd like to work in. So definitely reach out. I'm happy to share more about it and see if it's a good fit. Ludika says, happy holidays, wishing you and your family all the best in 2025. Thank you so much, Ludika. I really appreciate it. Same to you. And I will use this as an excuse to end the show. Thank you again, everybody. Wishing you the best. Happy, safe holidays, end of the year in 2024, and to a great 2025 ahead. Take care, everybody. Thanks again. Bye-bye.